Okay, now jumping into the basics. There's three branches of Washington state government: the legislature, the executive branch, and judicial branch. And to boil it down to the very basics, the difference between the three branches is the legislature writes laws, the executive branch enforces laws, and the judicial branch, which is the Washington Supreme Court, interprets laws. The executive branch is the governor's office and the state agencies. So there are 49 legislative districts in Washington. Each is represented by 2 representatives and 1 senator. It is a bicameral legislature, so it has 2 chambers. One is the House of Representatives and the other is the Senate. Each chamber has 2 caucuses, the Majority Caucus and Minority Caucus. The Democratic Caucus is the majority caucus in both chambers right now. It hasn't always been that way, but right now the Democratic Caucus has the most members in both chambers. And session is the period of time that laws can be passed, can be created, new laws can be created, existing laws can be changed, and budgets can be enacted. And each session begins on the second Monday of January of each year. The legislative cycle is 2 years long. It starts with a long session, which is on odd years like 2023, and it's 105 days, which is almost 4 months. And the second year is a short session, which is even years like 2024, and that's 60 days, about 2 months. And it's within a biennium. Bills, if they don't make it through the first session, so the long session, it will carry on to the next session, which is the short session. If it doesn't make it within a biennium, then it has died. It will not carry on anymore, so it needs to be reintroduced for the next biennium. And then the time between sessions is called interim. So we are in interim right now. And real quick, I'm going to show you how this shows up on the, how you can access this information on the legislative website. So you can find your district here. There's a district finder. And if you put your address in here, you can find your district, where it's located, as well as your state legislators and Congress people. You can also find information on the Senate and House here. So you can find all the information on senators here, for example. These are all the senators. They have their websites here, their emails, details, their committees. You can also access the caucus websites from here. So each caucus, so 4 caucuses in the legislature, they all have their own websites where they publish information on each of the members and the caucus as a whole. So these are all the Democratic senators here. And something that I think would be useful for anybody engaging in the legislature is using the member rosters. So this is at the very bottom. You can always access at the very bottom of the website. So if you go to the roster, there's a few ways that members are organized by. You can use any of them that's useful for you. I'm just going to use the standard one. And so this page has all of the legislators' districts, their room number, their phone number, their emails, as well as their office staff. So all legislative assistants and their emails are listed here as well. You can organize it by the House only or the Senate only. Okay. And this is the Capitol campus. I just want to give people a little physical orientation for if they show up on campus. This is a lot of what you'll see. So you'll see Jack here, the John A. Sherberg building, which houses about half of the Senate Democratic Caucus offices, as well as caucus staff and hearing rooms. This is the legislative building, also called the Ledger building. There is the Senate floor right here inside the building, as well as some Senate offices. And then on this side is the House floor, as well as some House offices. This is the J-Law building. So, that's the John L. O'Brien building. This has House Democratic offices as well as caucus staff. If you go past this building, there is a modular building that at the moment houses a lot of Republican offices because their original building is under construction right now. So you can't see it's behind the trees in the parking lot, but it's a modular building. And so if you come on campus, you'll be using those 4 buildings to do your advocacy and lobbying. From the viewpoints that we're at here, if you're standing at the Pritchard building, you'll be seeing this view. The Pritchard building is also where you would have lunch if you want food provided by the legislature. All right, now we're gonna jump into the legislative process. So we're going to be going through how bills move through the legislature or die. There's a lot of points in which they die. And this is to give an example of how difficult it is to pass a bill. So this is an example from the 2013 biennium. There were 4,118 bills introduced. Only 635 of them passed. And some of those bills, some of them were vetoed or partially vetoed. This is why some folks call the legislature a bill-killing machine. It's also been referred to as a sausage-making machine because of how complicated and obscure it can be. So we're going to go through how a bill passes through or dies in the legislature from the beginning. So in the beginning, there's going to be stakeholders coming up with an idea for a bill. It can be community members, it can be a nonprofit, it can be an agency. They're going to come up with an idea of what new policy they want to make or policy change they want to make to an existing law. And once they come up with their idea, they're going to meet with they're going to find a prime sponsor. We're going to use the Senate for an example throughout this section. So say a community member has an idea for a bill. They're going to find a senator to prime sponsor their bill. That prime sponsor is going to connect the stakeholders with caucus staff or nonpartisan staff. The policy staff are going to work with the prime sponsor and the stakeholders to draft up language. The prime sponsor is also going to try to find co-sponsors to sign on to that bill. And once the language is ready, as well as there's a signature sheet with this co-sponsors are signed, it's going to be brought to the code revisor's office, who are going to formalize the language, put it onto a very formal format, so that once the signature sheet and the code revisor's formatted sheet page is ready, the prime sponsor's office can drop it in the hopper. In the hopper, it's literally a wooden box, but it's also figuratively it signifies that a bill is going to be introduced. Once it's introduced, it's going to be brought onto the floor. Most folks don't see this process because it's really quick. The floor leader basically has each bill, the first and last line read on the floor, and it's called first reading. And that's when the bill is also going to be assigned to a committee. So in the policy committee, the bill needs to be scheduled a hearing and an executive session to get through the committee. So a hearing is when when people, usually it's the prime sponsor as well as stakeholders, are able to testify for a bill, either pro, con, or other. In executive session, that's when amendments can be made and votes by the committee are made to pass the committee or not. If the bill has a significant fiscal impact, it's going to go to a fiscal committee. In the Senate, that's Ways and Means, and it has to go through the same process as it did in the policy committee. And then if it has passed the policy committee, and if needed, the fiscal committee, it will arrive to the rules committee. This is this committee is different than the rest of the committees in that it is confusing and it's unusual. It doesn't operate as the others committees in that it needs to be polled. That is the official term, and the bill needs to be pulled to get out of the rules committee. And we won't get into the details, but it basically needs to get from one sheet to another sheet onto the floor calendar. It's not until it gets onto the floor calendar that it's scheduled to be heard on the floor. And so often when folks have their bill priority arrive at the rules committee, they will contact all the rules committee members to ask them to pull their bill. And so once it's scheduled on the floor calendar, it's gonna be scheduled for a second reading, which is the code for it's gonna be up for debate by the Senate floor. It's also when there can be amendments made on the bill. And the third reading is when the bill is up for a vote by the entire membership of the chamber. So all Senate members are going to vote on the bill, and it's going to be voted on for final passage. If it is voted off the floor, it's going to go to the opposite chamber. So if we start in the Senate, it's going to end up in the House, and it's going to repeat the whole process again, from the policy committee up into the House floor. If it passes both chamber floors, it can pass the legislature. But oftentimes in the opposite house, there are amendments made to the bill. And if in that case, there has to be a negotiation that happens where leadership in both chambers pick key folks to figure out what is the language that we're going to concur on. And if there is a concurrence on the language made, it's going to be voted on in both chambers again. Oh, sorry, real quick. When they're in negotiation, it's called a conference committee. The conference committee consists of the folks who are going to negotiate what ends up as the language, the final language that they're going to vote on again. If both the House and Senate concur on the language that came out of the conference committee, it will pass the legislature. Once it passes the legislature, it will go to the governor's office to either sign, veto, or partially veto. The governor has 5 to 20 days to sign the bill, depending on when they pass the legislature. If the governor does not sign the bill within the 5 to 20 days, it is automatically signed, so it will go into law. And how it goes into law is it goes to the Secretary of State's office where it's assigned a number, and it will end up as the Revised Code of Washington, RCW for short. Okay, and to give you some background information on the legislative process, these are some resources that will help you through the process to make sure that you are aware of the timeline and the structure that you're going to be moving through. So the cutoff calendar has all the cutoff dates that a bill must pass or else it dies. Of course, I should also note that with everything in the legislature, there's always exceptions. And so there's going to be special cases that come up but for the most part, it will follow the regular process. So yeah, so we'll look at the cutoff calendar in a second, as well as the House and Senate structure, legislative agencies, and TVW. So to find the cutoff calendar, we're gonna go to agenda, schedules, and documents. It's gonna be in the sidebar here. You're gonna go to session cutoff calendar, and then you can open the PDF. And these are all the dates that you should note that your bill should pass through by that date. So this is last session's cutoff calendar. The next year's calendar has not been published yet. So for example, on February 17th, the 40th day of session, the bill must pass policy committee. On February 24th, it has to pass fiscal committee. And I'll also show you the Senate structure because I think it's really helpful to know the ins and outs of the institution you'll be navigating, because then you have more grounding in what resources are available to you. I'm going to use the Senate as an example. So I'm going to go to the Senate webpage, go to Senate Administration. Here you will see the folks who run different parts of the Senate. So you'll see the Secretary of the Senate, folks who are at the top of the Senate who make sure that Senate operations are always in operation. And then you have the directors of the Senate Committee Services, which is nonpartisan policy staff, basically. If you come to the right here, there's an organizational chart. This is actually the chart that all staff have. And you'll see all the different departments, different offices within the Senate. So you have all the senators here. You have the Secretary of the Senate here. Legislative assistants are here. That's the senator's personal staff. You have the two caucuses here. Oftentimes when you're working on bills, you'll be working with caucus policy staff. And over here, you'll see there's a civic education department, which coordinates all the interns and pages. There's security. There's nonpartisan staff, which is called Senate Committee Services, and accounting. And I'll also show you legislative agencies. So you have some grounding in what those are. You might come in contact with them while you're advocating for a bill. So you'll go back to the home page. There's a tab called Legislative Agencies. Click on that. And as I mentioned, there's the Office of the Code Revisers. So they are the folks who they publish the RCWs. They also are the ones that you need to give bill language to them before you can put the bill language into the hopper. There's also LegTech. They're the people who run all of the technology in the Senate. And then there's a few committees where, for example, JLARC, they do reviews of the impact of bills after they are passed. And let me see. There's one thing I actually did not check before this. Okay. Oh, yes, it's here. All right. So there is a lot of sections of the legislative process that is recorded, and that is can be publicly viewed. I'm sorry, I'll go to that again. So if on any page on the legislative website, if you go to the bottom, you can access the link for TVW here. I just clicked TVW. It will bring you to a separate website. On this website, you can view live and recorded recordings of committee hearings and floor debates. And now let's move on. Oh, that's right. So that was it for the basics and the legislative process. Do we have any questions? Okay.
No, but thank you. It's helpful.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I think I'm talking to, oh, okay. We have a question from Angeli.
Hi there. Thank you for this overview. This is very helpful. A question I had is related to rules when it's at that stage. I'm still unclear exactly what happens in rules and what it means to pull the bill.
Yeah, okay. No problem. Yeah, let me get into detail on what happens in rules then. So in rules, at a high level, a bill must be pulled from rules to end up on the chamber floor, so the House floor or the Senate floor for a vote. When a bill arrives at rules, so the first thing is, so in the House, it will end up on the review calendar. In the Senate, it will end up on the white sheet. That's bills that are up for consideration to be pulled. If the bill is pulled by a member, it can be pulled onto the consideration calendar in the House or the green sheet in the Senate. And that's the cue for the floor leader to schedule the bill on the floor calendar. But this is where it gets a little confusing. Senate leadership, for example, has a lot of control and say in this section, in that even if a rules member pulls a bill, the floor leader has a choice to not schedule it for the floor. If it does not get pulled, it's considered X-filed. So that's what this X is. And X-filed is a specific coding for a bill for if it is X-filed, then it can stay in rules to be considered in rules again for the next session if it's if there's a short session following the session that you're in. Yeah, does that help?
Yes, thank you. And one more question, if it's okay. So it seems like the stakeholders, they have involvement, at the beginning with an idea and possibly providing some draft language to a bill. As the amendments and negotiations happen, are they also involved in that process at all? Or is that basically taken over by the policy team or, whoever else is involved?
Mm-hmm. Ideally, they are involved. Most prime sponsors, if they care about the bill, they'll be in very close communication with the stakeholders. It does depend on the member, but I can't think of a situation where a member would not want to communicate with their stakeholders on a bill to make sure that the stakeholders are okay with the language that ends up in the bill. And there should be a lot of communication between the prime sponsor's office and the stakeholders. For example, if another member tries to amend the prime sponsor's bill, the prime sponsor will they'll make sure with their stakeholders that there's some ground action happening to so for example, the prime sponsor will say, hey, stakeholders, there's this amendment that is changing the bill language to have an impact that is entirely different than what we want. And so the stakeholders will say, okay, we're going to organize our folks, and they'll find constituents of key districts to contact their legislators to say, please vote against this amendment. We are not in support of it, and it's going to have this bad impact, and so that's why we want you to be against this amendment.
Thank you.
Yeah, good questions. Any last questions before we move on? Okay, no, I'm going to share my screen then. Okay. All right, so we're gonna jump into participating in the process section. And this section, we're gonna be living in the website for a while. So just to give you a precursor of what we're gonna go through, there's 3 sections to this. There's gonna be informational resources. That's gonna be like bill tracking, what you can do on the bill page, what's happening in committees, and how you can find agenda and schedules for each of the committees and for the legislature as a whole. And then there's a section for contacting your legislators. This is usually when you're trying to advocate for a bill. You can email, phone call, visit the office, or have a meeting, or go to a town hall of a legislature. And you can also testify in committee hearings. There's 3 types of testimonies that you can do. There's testifying verbally, so you can either do it remotely or in person. You can send in a written testimony, or you can sign in pro, con, or other. So I'm going to show you how we can do all of this on the website. All right, so we're going to start with bill tracking. So I'm sure a lot of you folks have a lot of bill priorities that you want to track throughout the legislative process. So you have probably a process of your own to make sure that you know where a bill is at every point in the legislative process. You can also do that on the legislative website. So you can do that by, so this is the home page again. If you scroll down a little bit, you can track legislation through these options. We're going to look at track bills. And there's a lot of information you can get on bills here if you're doing research. To track bills, we're going to click selected bill tracking. Because they want to retain the bills that you want to track, you have to sign in. So if you don't have a sign in, you create an account. Once you sign in, you can actually create a list. So this is an example. I create a list, and in that list, I have a list of bill priorities. And then for each section, it's gonna have the documents, it's gonna have the title, it's gonna have the status of it. And you can have as many bill priorities as you want to track here. Most of you know what a bill page is. It is the home page of each bill that has been introduced in the legislature. I'm just gonna put in a random bill. So on a bill page, it's gonna let you know the status of the bill. so where it is in the legislature. You can also send a comment on the bill to your legislature here. You can also sign yourself up for email notifications and text notifications if there are any changes to the bill. So say the bill moved from the policy committee to a fiscal committee, you will get an alert when this happens. If you scroll down a little bit, you can see all the steps that the bill has taken. So this bill has already been introduced and referred to Ways and Means. It did have a public hearing and an executive session scheduled, but even though it was scheduled, there was no action taken in executive session, so the bill did not make it further than the than the hearing for Ways and Means. And a little bit more down is the original bill language, as well as the bill report. So bill reports is put together by committee staff. They do a lot of research on the bill topic and the bill background and its possible impacts, and they'll put it all in the bill report. A little more down is the TVW recordings for the hearings and the debates that bill has had. So if I click this, it would bring me to TVW, and it will show me the hearing that was had for this bill in Senate Ways and Means. You can also find information on each of the committees. So, well, sorry, I should start from the home page. So if you go to the home page and click Legislative Committees, you can find all the House and Senate committees here. I'm gonna click a random committee, education, and here you can find all the members and staff for that committee, as well as all the schedules and agendas. So schedules and agendas is really helpful because if you have a bill up for a hearing, you're gonna want to know when, at what point in that committee meeting, your bill is gonna have a hearing. So if you, okay, yeah. So if you click on committee documents or agenda, either works, it's going to show you the order of what is on the agenda. This is not a great example because they only had a work session for this meeting, but usually there's a list of bills, and if you click that bill, it'll actually have the bill information here. But it's really helpful to know the schedule because you want to know if you're like first or second up, so you can prepare yourself for when you're going to testify, if you're going to testify. All right, now we're going to move on to the next section, which is contacting your legislators. So you can actually have a one-stop shop for all the ways you can contact your legislators on this website. So this is a home page again. I'm going to go to contact your legislators. And it's loading. So it's going to bring you to a list of legislators here. I'm going to click on the first one. And this is a web form email page. So if you fill this out, you can let your legislator know your address, your contact information, and the bill number that you're going to be you're going to be giving your opinion on. So you can say you support, oppose, or are neutral on a bill. Write your subject, and then you can write your message here. This is basically writing an email to a legislator through the website. And it's really helpful because within each office, we have a tracking system for bill opinions from constituents. And sending in a form email is really helpful for the offices because usually we have it does vary between offices, but most offices have a process where they're able to use form emails to count how many, what positions how many constituents have on bills. And you can also visit the office of a legislator. Again, that's if you want to do that, you would go to rosters. Again, rosters, it has the contact information and the office location for each member. So you can show up at a legislative office during session. You can also email the legislator or their legislative assistant to request a meeting. Another way that you can engage with a legislator is to show up at their town hall. Town hall dates are chosen by each office. A relatively recent development for the legislature, or at least the Democratic caucuses for each chamber, is we have a town hall weekend, but that town hall weekend is a new date every year. It's usually chosen sometime around the beginning of session. And that's when offices can opt to have their town halls during that date. And so the intention is that most districts are going to have their town hall happen on the same date across the state. But there are some offices that choose to pick their own dates, and it's usually a Saturday, and it's 2 hours, and it's a time for a legislator to present their priorities, let their constituents know what is happening in the legislature during session, and also do Q&A. So their constituents can get to know their position on things. All right, and now we're going to move into the next section, which is testifying in committee hearings. So to testify in committee hearings, there's a one-stop shop link for that as well. So I'm at the home page again. Okay, it's going to be the second link here on the right. So we already went through this section, communicating with a legislator. This section is about participating in committee hearings. So again, there's testifying verbally, there's submitting written testimony, and there's signing in your position on a bill. So I'm going to go through these a bit quickly. So if I wanted to testify pro for a bill in the Senate, for example, I'm going to click Senate. It's gonna bring you to this page where you can find the committee that your bill is in. I'm gonna click Higher Education and Workforce Development as an example committee. You will choose the date that the bill will have a hearing on. And these instructions are gonna be here no matter what. So you always know how to sign in to testify for a hearing. I can't do it now because there are no hearings to testify for right now. But you can choose to testify remotely or in person. If you choose to testify remotely, a link will be sent to the email you provide before the committee, and you must sign in to testify, I believe, at least 1 hour before the committee hearing, if the process is the same as last year. You can also send in a written testimony. It's going to be the same process as you just saw for the testifying in the committee hearing, except it's going to provide you a page where you can submit your written testimony. Since it's the same, I'm going to move on to signing in pro, con, or other for a bill. So this is a very similar process. You're going to choose your committee. the time they're going to have a hearing. You pick your bill, and I'm going to click a link to show you what folks signed in for this bill last year. So as you can see, there's a list of names and their organization and how they what their position was for that bill, if they were con, pro, or other, and also show the time that they signed in their opinions on that bill.